Part 3. Strengths, Weaknesses, and Weapons. All characters have their strengths and weaknesses, and villains are no exception. Just to show how well-rounded characters they are, one of Jake's biggest strengths would have to be how well he can easily dominate over others because of his huge size. Because Jake is bigger than most of the characters in the movie, he could easily intimidate someone in a confrontation with little effort and easily overpower someone by looming over them or wrapping them in his coils. Which I also think makes part of the character. He knows he can easily dominate over others, and regardless to say, I think he enjoys that a bit. Of course, his weapons are another big part of his strengths, but we will get to that part later. His weakness is probably the more obvious one, being that he has a fear of hawks, which is understandable because in real life, hawks are the only other big predator that preys on them for food. But I think it is deeper than that. I say he must have had a really traumatizing encounter with a hawk previously in his life to react in such a strong way. I think that because in real life, rattlesnakes rarely run from anything, even hawks. Rattlesnakes stand their ground most of the time rather than run, mostly because they can't move very fast to outrun their predators. Also, I think Jake has an even deeper fear, the fear of his own death. He would fear the hawk because it brings death for him, but also, when Rango pointed the gun at him, we see Jake starts to get scared there too, because he starts to realize that he could be seconds away from death. While it is good for Jake to have a weakness because it shows that he is not totally invincible, I feel his weakness was a little too obvious and kind of counteracts his character a bit. For an outlaw who is not supposed to be afraid of anything, he certainly has a lot to be afraid of. Besides being the obvious weapons, he has the gun at the end of his tail. Jake has two other weapons that he uses. One is his venom, which he really didn't use in the movie except at the part where he intimidated Rango with it. It would seem kind of weird for Jake not to use his venom, since rattlesnake venom is very potent and can kill even a person within an hour. But, in actuality, rattlesnakes don't use their venom often in real life. When defensive, rattlesnakes don't strike until it is their last resort, and even if they do strike, they don't use their full amount of venom. Even when hunting, they wait until the last possible moment when their prey comes in strike range so they can get an accurate shot so that they don't waste their venom. They don't even use their venom on their own kind. If two male snakes get into a confrontation, they just raise their bodies up and push each other around until one of them gets tired and quits. The reason for all of this is their venom often takes days to replenish, so in reality, rattlesnakes use their venom sparingly. Another part of Jake that can be considered a weapon is constriction by his whole body. It seems odd because rattlesnakes are not known to be constrictors, but by coiling himself around his victims, it makes it easy for him to overpower others. Just from his sheer size and powerful muscles in his body, he could easily squeeze someone to death. Now, on to his main weapons. The gun at the end of his tail, as I mentioned before. I said his gun is very similar to that of a Gatling gun, which was invented by a person by the name of Dr. Richard J. Gatling. It was one of the very first early weapons that was able to fire multiple rounds at a very fast rate. It was first used in the American Civil War back in the 1860s, and modified versions of it are still used in combat today, which is now known as the minigun. It had 6 barrels, just like Jake's, and the barrels could only fire a single round once it reached a certain point in the cylinder. But by the barrels rotating around rapidly, the shots could be fired off a very fast rate, about 800 to 900 pounds per minute to be exact. So, my guess is that Jake's gun works in that similar manner. All of the 6 cylinders would have 6 barrels on them. His ammunition would work his way up through all the 6 cylinders in a spiral fashion, as each cylinder spins clockwise and counterclockwise from each other. Once one bullet was fired, the next would immediately take its place in the bullet chamber, and the same process would go on down the line. All the early Gatling guns were hand-cranked, so exactly how Jake fires off his is a bit of a mystery. But I'm guessing a muscle at the end of his tail is what pushes the firing pins forward that shot the bullet down the barrel. The Gatling gun's ammunition was reloaded through an ammunition hopper held by the side of the cylinders, but Jake doesn't have that luxury, so how he would reload his gun is a bit of a mystery as well. But just to give a rough guess, I say since the 6th cylinder is attached to his tail, that one would probably never move. But I'm guessing the 5th cylinder would have a top break or a swing out design, like most of the revolver handguns had. With the top break design, the rest of the cylinders would break away from the sixth barrel, and rear of the fifth cylinder would be exposed with the barrels and slide the bullets into the barrels that way. With the swing-out design of the cylinder would swing out from its holding place in the gun, exposing the barrels. As you may have noticed in the movie, Rango's revolver gun had the same design. Jake's gun would work in a similar fashion, where the fifth cylinder would swing out away from the sixth cylinder, exposing the barrels, and he would just rotate the barrels around to make the bullet slide into its proper place until all of his cylinders were full. Jake is surprisingly very skilled with his gun. He can shoot things accurately, even though his type of gun is not known for their accuracy. He was able to shoot the sheriff's sign down without hitting anyone around it, and shoot Wounded Bird from the top of the tower with just 2 shots.